All right, so I've got my markup here, and now I need to think about what I want to do to make these changes. We've got a lot of textural detail in this shoe. I also want to make changes to the larger areas of value and hue, in the toe where I've circled, where there's these big warbles, but it's also locked in to that finer detail that's going to be hard to manipulate independently of the darker values. Now, thinking in terms of two components, the higher texture detail and then the larger areas of value, that sort of methodology or thought has been around for a long time, and there's some tools that retouchers have used to work on those two components individually. Now, what I want to teach you today is a change to that traditional method that is pretty powerful and pretty exciting. I'm just going to jump right into it and start separating the file. Let's start with the base, because once again, that's the largest area of real estate. That's where we're going to get the most payoff. I'm going to turn off my markup. I'm going to go to my base pixels, and I'm going to duplicate this up by holding down Option and just dragging up. It's a quick way to do it. I'm going to rasterize this layer. So we're committing to our liquify at this point. We're stamping up. That's what we call that. I'm going to group this. I'm going to label it my FS. Duplicate, so I have 2 pixel layers in here. You can see the file size is expanding, but believe me, it's worth it. So I'm going to go to my base layer. I'm going to convert that to a smart object. Now the first step I'm going to do on this base layer here, I'm going to name it low because this is my low frequency component. What we have to do is blur this. That's our first step. Now in the past, the method everyone used at this stage is what introduced the major flaws into the system. And why a lot of people really got down on it. So with one simple change, we've totally eliminated the problems with the low frequency blur. Previously, people used Gaussian blur. What we're going to use today is median. Now, median is an amazing tool. Let me go back so you know exactly where to find that. So we'll go to Filter, Noise, Median. Now, median is this amazing tool for blurring while also maintaining edges. This was the problem in frequency separation as it's been used for years. That Gaussian blur destroys the edges. It blurs everything. And that's where you start introducing halos and it becomes really hard to work with. Median solves that problem. Let's pull in a little closer and see what it's doing. So as you can see, as opposed to Gaussian blur, it's still maintaining some of the detail in here in the edges. Let's turn it on and off. Now it's really destroying or wiping, as I like to say, the high frequency information that is the fabric texture in here. And that's exactly what we want to do. So for our first pass, we have to choose how much high frequency information we want to wipe from this layer. And this is a fine point because this is something you need to practice to get right. Right now, if I just want to clean up some dust on here, the value of 12 I have in is way too much. It's going to push too much information to the high. I think I'd do something more like 4. So I just remove enough information, just the information that I really want to clean off. I want to leave all the rest. because if you push too much to the high, you're going to introduce problems into the system and you're going to be doing work twice and make life harder on yourself. This is something that comes with practice. You have to continually experiment with different levels depending on what you want to do. So here's another example. Say I want to remove the toe warbles here. Now those are not contained in the high frequency. That's low frequency information. So something like 12 starts to remove everything but those details. Now, this still isn't enough because I want to be able to manipulate these in a really loose way, but there's still detail kept in the toe here. You also want to approach frequency separation in a systematic way where you tackle the big stuff first and then move on to the finer details. And lots of times I'll do multiple separations in one file in order to target different areas of the image. So I'm going to commit to that 12 right there. And see, it's a smart filter, so I can go back in and change that if I need to. But that wasn't enough blur. Let's try another median. You can stack medians on top and see what happens. Now we're getting somewhere. All that fine detail went away. That's exactly what we want. Because look how isolated these changes in value are now. I know that now that those are isolated really well, I can attack them really easily and not have to use a whole lot of precision. It's great. So this process might seem a little mysterious right now, but you basically just have to follow along, and just like the rest of the system, follow the steps, and the more you practice this, it's going to really start to make more and more sense, and you are going to have more and more control over how you execute this. So just trust in the process. What we're going to do now is create our high component. So what we need to do is essentially subtract all of the information that we see right here, all this blurred information, in order to be able to work on the higher textural detail separately. I basically need to subtract all of this information from that high layer, which is still just a flat pixel layer. I'll show you how to do that. I'm going to call this high. And what I need to do is use some apply image techniques that at first look very bizarre and very complicated, but follow this method every time. You don't even have to know how it works. And later, I'm going to provide you with an action that runs this automatically where you can change some of the values, but you don't even have to go through this step every time. So I want to apply in my source file, which is the file we're working in, a layer called low. I'm going to apply the whole thing, which is RGB. That's what that means. And in the blending mode of the application, I want to subtract. Now, have scale set to 2 and offset to 128. You don't need to know why that works. It just does. Apply that. So if I just bring up a 50% gray layer underneath, you can see exactly what's on the high layer. This is the information that lives there now. And I set it to linear light. You also don't need to know why that works, but it just does. So let me turn that off. There's our image. If I turn off the frequency separation group, there should be no change whatsoever in the image. That means that you've done it right. You've got two components. You've got your high and your low. I'm going to throw away this 50% layer. That was just to see that. Turn off the high. I've got the low. And the high consists of just the high frequency information with the low subtracted from it. This concept is going to become much more comfortable the more you work with it. I'm going to show you how to manipulate the low layer right now. There are a couple more steps to set this up. Duplicate the high, clip it to the high, and set it to normal. The blending mode of this high layer dictates the blending mode of this one as long as it's clipped to it. All this does is allows us to see our changes later by turning this layer on and off. I'll show you how to do that next. The low, however, we need to duplicate up and rasterize. This is our paint layer. We want to paint directly on the pixels, so this is essentially destructive, but you've always got your low backup in case you need to return to the original. So next comes the good part. Everything up to now hasn't been particularly mind-blowing. It's just a different way of blurring the low layer. It's really effective, but it's not a huge departure from Gaussian blur. The next step is the way that people have normally worked on the low or the high has been painting with the brush or cloning or healing, and all those tools are great and they have their time. But the star of the show here, the tool that has been forgotten, and I can't think of anyone in retouching ever using it for anything else, but is so powerful when used in this context, it's just mind-blowing. It's a tool called Mixer Brush, which is, for all intents and purposes, the finger painting tool. It's not like smudge, it's different, and I'm going to show you how. And when used in this combination with frequency separation, it's the best thing that's ever happened to you. Guaranteed. Check it out. The Mixer Brush tool lives in the brush stack. Now, what you want to do is keep all the base settings, all the default settings. It's probably going to come up with this turned on. You want that turned off. This one, which if we can see the tooltip, clean the brush after each stroke, you want that on. All the rest of these values jack up to 100. And wet you can change just like, opacity or flow just by hitting the number keys. We want to open our brush palette, make sure spacing is pulled all the way down so you don't see any steps. Now I'm going to show you how to easily eliminate these big areas of value change. And it's as simple as dragging the brush back and forth across these areas. Now I want to have pressure sensitivity on because I like that. Now, that just took me 10 seconds. What would normally take a lot longer and a lot more care. I mean, not a ton of time, that wasn't very complicated, but if you can think about this in terms of the entire image and having the ability to push pixels around rather than paint over them or clone them out, that's exactly what we've always wanted when thinking about making changes to garments. Think about big folds. You can just wipe them away. It's amazing. Skin, variation in skin tone, separating like this, whereas before in frequency separation, thing everyone always complained about because it was overused. People were trying to brush on the low layer and they end up making their subjects look like porcelain dolls or something. And it's really easy to do if you don't know how to use this update to the traditional frequency separation. Now what we used to do with a lot of dodging and burning can now be done using this method, and it's a hell of a lot faster. So I'm going to keep moving through this shoe and you can see how I manipulate things without having to think too much or work too hard, which is exactly what I like. So you can also perform this with the high on. So I'm going to turn this layer on and off so you can see the change. It's pretty good. And because it's hidden under the high, you don't have to do a whole hell of a lot to make that precise or exact. Let's take a look at our markup, just to remind me. Yeah, there's some variations on the toe here. So I can just smooth that out. Can smooth that transition. Can even reduce some of these in here. Let's see what this looks like. This kind of buckle here, I think we can really reduce. But let's see how it interacts when we change it, because sometimes if you move the value too much under really hard, high frequency, it can look a little bit soft, and there's some methods to fix that. All right, so this shoe in general is in pretty good shape already, so there's not a whole lot of big stuff to do, but that certainly took care of the, let's turn it on and off, the main things that we wanted to do on the low layer. I might adjust this just a bit more. But for some of these things, you can see if I try to push it too far, even here, we're introducing some little problems into the high where it's getting a little bit soft. And that means for that particular thing that I wanted to do, that I have the wrong value of separation. So there's too much median for me to do that move. So I need to rethink the method that I used to create the low layer. So I'm pretty much done with this big separation that I just did. I'm going to call that FS big and commit to that by merging up and doing another separation. This one's going to be a lot smaller, and it's going to be for dust. Run median on the low. Oh, I forgot to convert to a smart object. Might take a minute for it to save. Sometimes it does. This time it was fast. That's great. Noise, median. I'm going to bring this back down, way down. C4 or 5. Yeah, let's go for 5. I'm going to actually use this technique of naming this layer something I can see really easily, because apply image has the same issue as liquify in that the drop down, I don't want to scroll through all this stuff now because it's starting to get too confusing. I can just add that and apply. Set that to linear light. Clip it. Normal. Duplicate my low. rasterize it. Now, I'm not going to go through renaming these. The action that you get later is going to set this up perfectly for you with the right names. So look at the difference in this separation. Now what I'm going to do is start stamping on the high. And I don't have to worry about the underlying value at all. I'm free to just stamp kind of from wherever there's a matching texture. Right now I'm using the clone stamp tool, which you can access just by hitting C. I actually prefer this in a lot of cases to the healing brush tool, just because it's so easy to work with when you have a good separation. So, okay, before I go any further into cleanup on the high, I want to show more stuff that the mixer brush does perfectly that other tools and methods could never achieve. So let's just close up the base real quick, because I see a lot of stuff that we need to do in the bubble sole, and the mixer brush is going to be perfect for tackling some of these really hard things that previously would have taken a lot of work. Let's check it out. Let's go into bubble sole. I'm going to start my separation. Now this one probably isn't going to be huge. Just moving pretty fast with the setup here. So you'll get an action that can do this later. So we want to just wipe enough information off so that it's smooth. And tackling this big specular highlight is exactly where mixer brush is going to shine. I'm going to use that trick. To apply the image to the high. All right, let's get to work. I'm going to start right off with this guy right here. Now, I haven't prepped this. I haven't done this yet. This is just me going right in and seeing if I can just get rid of this with the mixer brush, and I'm pretty confident that I can. Let's see how well it works. I'm going to reduce the wet just a bit. Sure I have the right brush on. I did. So we're basically just finger painting on the low. Now that to me is pretty magical. That is something that I couldn't do with any other tool unless I had a really good place to clone from. But in a situation like this, you'd almost rather just do this painting by yourself and create these shapes, because all they are big, sort of big blocks of color. Now another cool trick is to switch your brush, turn off sensitivity, click in one spot, and shift click to another in order to create a straight line of blended pixels. It can sometimes help along straight lines, and I'll show you how to use that a lot more later. So I'm moving pretty fast and loose here. Just want to create the general shape. And then I can go back in and I can use other tools here too in the low. Let's, I don't want to overstate the value of the mixer brush. It's amazing and it changes the way that we work, but the other tools on the low layer, such as the stamp, healing brush, and regular brush, among others, are still totally viable techniques. So what I'm using is the stamp. I'm going to reduce the opacity just a bit to 60. And I'm going to try to paint in this feature just a little bit here. Just to match. But then I'm going to go right back to the mixer brush because I just love working with it. And I'll blend those pixels in. So now you can see why we do the combination of the mixer brush as well as frequency separation. Why it works so well in frequency separation, because you could never use this brush on something that's high and crisp because it would just destroy all the information. But when we separate those into two different components, all we're dealing with are these big blobs of color. And if you need to make changes on that level, this is the best way to do it. So let's see if we can blend that more. Let's turn the eye back on and see what's on there. Now, to do something like that quick is pretty cool, like that. And we can wipe the rest by going back into the stamp tool, set to 100, clone stamp tool, and just remove any of this chud that's on here that is left over. Now there's no real detail in this area here. I'm basically just cloning texture from this area. But look how easily I can do that in a frequency separation workflow. We're gonna have to add some grain back into this area here, I think. So let's go back to the low and keep prepping. And turn back on pressure sensitivity. I'm going to add a little bit of variation back in here. Yeah, and remember, since we're inside this bubble soul mask, I can just push this stuff up here and not have to worry about it bleeding into the blue soul above it. So the fact that I can do that kind of thing without having to worry about this edge at all is one of those thank your past self moments where you can just move through a file and just sort of clean with impunity, which I like focusing on one thing at once, one thing at one time, rather than having to stop this flow and work on masks or something. So with the stamp tool, I'm going to reduce opacity and see if I can pull. You know what? Forget that. I am going to work more with mixer brush. Improve that shape right there. And I wonder if I could just pull a little there. So, I mean, clearly this is a lot more like painting, but you don't have to be Picasso here to get these results. It's really forgiving, and especially when you view it underneath the high layer in areas where you have texture, you can get away with a whole lot, and you can move really fast. So let's do more mixer brush. Oops. So I'm going to just start moving pretty fast here and just clean this whole area. Okay, so I've basically gone through the whole bubble sole on the low only. See, I've still got the high turned off. And just stepping back to compare before and after, that's pretty good, pretty fast results on the low layer clean. But like I said before, that was basically my micro pass on the low, and now I want to just step back and maybe smooth just a couple of lines out from the more bird's eye view, and that should not take long. Yeah, so I'm really just continuing to move forward on all these changes, just smoothing this out. And it's very extensive, but this is another one of those incremental steps toward a completely professional level commercial retouch. And it can be a little bit mysterious in the beginning, like what is a professional level? And it's really best demonstrated by this attention to detail, the different components of the image, the crafting of every single element in the image, the perfection of every single element. That's what adds up to a professional level retouch, and that's what high-end clients are going to look for from a high-end retoucher. That's what they're going to expect. They're used to seeing that level of perfection, and knowing this process in the system is the best way, and in a lot of cases, the only way to get to that end result. Not everybody has access to that, but now you do, because you can see the guts of every step that I'm going through and how much time and attention I spend to each element in the image. So for this sole, this is pretty much all I want to do. I'm going to move into the high before moving on to the next element, remembering that I didn't really do any high work on the body, so we still have to do that. And I'm just going to start moving through, doing the separation on the remaining elements, moving from low to high work systematically every single time. Start on the low, go to the high. Sometimes I'll keep the high on, but you'll see how I work and you'll get the tempo. Okay, so I finished with the high cleaning using the clone tool. You can see from here it's, there's some pretty big shifts, but definitely kind of smoothed out this area up in here, that kind of textured area. But I kept that texture because I think it looks kind of cool as long as it's even and it doesn't look like a mistake. So I'm going to... We might end up doing some more manipulation in here, but I think that's going to happen later when we start doing color work. I don't want to try to fix these big shifts in frequency separation. I don't think that's the best way to do it. But let's pull out and do before and after of the whole separation. And I'm going to turn off my palette so we can just see everything. And that's a pretty big improvement. Pretty quickly, we removed this huge specular highlight that I thought was going to be pretty bad, but it turned out to be pretty easy. And I think overall we got a lot of nice shape and smooth detail in this bubble sole. Don't worry about the Air Max, that's messed up. That's because I haven't moved my Air Max group to the top. So I'm gonna do the same process with the red sole, blue sole, swoosh, and the body of the shoe, and these top elements too. And I'm gonna move pretty quickly through that. All right, so I feel like I'm done with cleanup. You can see how long that took, how much time I spent on each section. You can always leave and come back to your cleanup because this is going to be your base pixel layer within each of those groups, and you're just going to do color and lighting on top of each of these. So you're inevitably going to come back and find some things that maybe you missed or that you want to change. And right now we can just take a look at the progress that I made using this frequency separation. Here's the base on and off. You can see the changes in the toe. Clean up on the eyelets and around the laces. The Air Max I'm going to move up to the top. I just saw that because I have, put it right there. So I'm going to do a little work on the Air Max in just a bit, but right now we're just going to look at this cleanup. Red Soul has quite a transformation. Off, on. Especially up in this area here, really got cleaned up quite a bit. Nice and smooth. The bubble, though, is where we see like the most transformation, definitely. Really love that back and forth. Like I said, I'm going to tune the area where the specular was to get that a little bit better, but I'm going to do that with different methods. Yeah, really cool progress on the bubble. Blue mid. Looks nice and smooth now. It was a little bit creased before, a little bit chunky. Smooth that out. Swoosh. Yeah, not much. A little bit of progress on the swoosh. Just a little bit of dust cleanup. And what else? Laces. Laces weren't very dramatic either. I think that was just a little bit of dust. A little bit of smoothing. And the liner. Same deal. So I think the takeaway here is that looking at all these individual elements, and we made different levels of progress in each one, but everything added on top of each other, these incremental steps towards this perfection, just by following the system and just going through it for every single element, it just all adds up to the professional level of retouching that happens for commercial images. And so turning on and off the original, you can really see the transformation that's starting to really occur by just following these steps and stacking one on top of the other, putting one foot in front of the next, not looking too far ahead, and just getting down into the details, cleaning everything up, and there you go. It all adds up to professional level retouching. Okay, so now you've really seen the power of Frequency Separation 2.0. Keep working with it. It's going to get better. You're going to get better at it, and you're going to be able to find ways to use it for things that you just never imagined. I keep finding new ways to use it. I get fast, flexible, really effective results with it every time. It should be part of your workflow now. So next, we're moving on to lighting and contouring.